This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Eben Jansen. This show is live and broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now, with the old show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Today we look at the high-profile case of a unique sexual predator that's in court in Bloemfontein. We'll be live there for an update shortly. Then 73 men in South Africa are currently implicated in child pornography cases. Complaints against South Africa's teachers have also doubled this year alone. This weekend saw South Africa join the world in welcoming the UN's adoption of new Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. A landmark case last week saw the first sale in execution of a Zimbabwean property in South Africa. And also South Africa's captain, Springbok captain, John de Villiers, is out of the World Cup for a fourth time in a row. Our question of the day, well, it asks of you, what are your views on Springbok captain John de Villiers' World Cup curse? That's what we've called it, seeing that he's out for a fourth time in a row at World Cups. At SABC Newsroom, that's where you send us your views on that matter. They've been wide-ranging across social media, so send it to at SABC Newsroom. First up, let's get the Monday morning's news with Anine Dormal.
Good morning, I'm Anine Dormal. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. Minister of Sport Fikile Mbalula and Springbok coach Heineke Meyer have paid tribute to John de Villiers. Last night, the Springbok captain announced his retirement from international rugby. This following the jaw fracture he sustained in Saturday's World Cup rugby match. The 34-year-old captained the Boks 37 times and retires as the second most capped Springbok captain of all time. Today is D-Day for National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha. The National Police Commissioner has to make representations against her suspension to President Jacob Zuma. Piecha has been asked to explain why she should not be suspended, pending the final determination of her fitness to hold office. It's not yet clear if Czech fugitive Radovan Krejcir will be charged for his alleged involvement in a foiled prison break. The Department of Correctional Services is tight-lipped about the possibility of new charges. This after Krejcir was allegedly among the inmates who were planning to escape from the Zonderwater Correctional Centre north of Pretoria. The SABC has sought to dispel confusion about the much-reported salary of its COO, Claudio Motsoeneng. This after the Communication Workers Union asked the SABC board to explain. Talking to Morning Live earlier, Motsoeneng spoke about the controversy surrounding his salary increase.
If people work so hard and generate revenue themselves, this is not a taxpayer's money. Because I need to clarify this confusion about taxpayers' money. It is not the taxpayers' money. It is what people deserve. Because without people doing that, SABC will collapse.
South Africa has been reeling from a spate of police killings this year. This as the life of another officer has been claimed. In the latest incident, an off-duty Cape Town police officer was killed and robbed of his weapon. This year, around 60 police officers across the country have been killed. And US President Barack Obama has praised the success of the Millennium Development Goals. He, however, told world leaders, including President Jacob Zuma, that their work is nowhere near being complete. Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma called on his peers to commit to the new goals. President Zuma addressed a plenary session on the adoption of the SDGs in New York. The new universal framework sets out 17 ambitious goals to end poverty, fight inequality, injustice, and tackle climate change over the next 15 years.
The triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality that the development agenda seeks to address is the primary focus of the South African government and people.
Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for SABC Newsroom. Of course, you can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Now, the Danish national who was arrested last week following the discovery of 21 clitorises in his freezer is expected to appear in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court for a bail application this morning. Last week, he told a Danish newspaper, Extra Bladet, that he has never ever committed anything criminal in South Africa and added that it was his wife who keeps the genitalia. His wife, who is also alleged to have been a victim, has refused police witness protection and fled the country, leaving her 2 young children behind. The 63-year-old accused is facing 5 charges of sexual assault and the violation of the Medical Act. Now, joining us from Bloemfontein, the Magistrates Court, to be exact, is our reporter, Cornelo Legafola. Very good morning to you, Cornelo. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you and good morning to the viewers.
Cornelo, I say there's quite a busy atmosphere around the court today. Just tell us what's happening there and what's the expectation of this morning.
Yes, we are here at the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court. As we speak now, the man has just appeared in front of the Magistrate Court and the case has been postponed. As I'm speaking to you now, it has just been postponed to next week, Monday, on the 5th of October.
It seems as if there are quite a few women's rights movements or women's rights groups in the vicinity where you're standing. Is that so? And if they are, what are they saying?
Yes, there is a considerable number of ANC Women's League who are here, who were demonstrating earlier on, and they are saying they are by no means opposing the bail application or opposing that the bail be granted to this Danish national. And they have vowed that they will follow it up until it comes to an end, because what they feel is that this Danish guy has really humiliated the women, and as women they are not going to just keep mum and say nothing about it. They want to make sure that the law take its full course and that this man is getting what is due to him.
Now, Cornelo, for the benefit of those who haven't been following this case and who are watching outside South Africa's borders, just recap for us this shocking story that's developed here over the last couple of weeks.
Yes, it all started when we heard last week of this horrible act that has happened. That the man, this Danish national, has actually been arrested a week before last on a Thursday, and he made his first appearance in court on Monday last week, whereby he was remanded in custody after he appeared in court. So he came back to court today, and the case has also been postponed to Monday next week. But what we have heard is that amongst the 21 women who were the victims of this Danish guy, one was his wife, and he has since fled the country into Lesotho and leaving behind 2 children, the one aged 2 and the other one aged 4. So this is how the things are going here, and I mean this has stirred a bit of confusion and anger amongst the people here, especially in the area of Langenhoven Park here in Bloemfontein, whereby I was speaking to one of the residents who is residing there in Langenhoven Park. She was saying to me, this woman, that hey, they think they are no longer safe because they can be at any given time be attacked and this kind of acts be conducted on them. So that is how things are at the moment. But all I can say is that here at the court place, there is full number of ANC Women's League who came in their numbers to come and say they are opposing that this man be granted bail.
Cornelo, what are the police saying about the investigation, especially about the wife, who the husband is now accusing that she's the one who's been collecting the genitalia in this case? She's fled the country. Is she going to be charged as an accomplice, maybe?
Yes, we managed to speak to the police, I think, late yesterday. The spokesperson of the Hawks the spokesperson of the Hawks, Brigadier Hangwani Mulauzi, actually said they are working with the authorities from Lesotho to make sure that they track down these other women, because supposedly the large number of the victims of this Danish national, they are from Lesotho. So for them having to be suspectedly fled into Lesotho, it doesn't make it easier for the Hawks and the police to investigate well about this matter. So they are working together with the Lesotho authorities to make sure that they track down these women, and after having tracked them down, maybe that will make things much more easier for them to can continue with the matter, because now they are busy investigating. And it might well happen that all these women, 20 women plus this other one who happens to be his wife, it might happen that most of them are underage. So we are speaking under correction here, but it might happen that most of them are underage, because he actually lured them into his house, whereby he sedated them and starting to make operations on them.
Cornelo, thank you very much for that update this morning. That's our reporter, Cornelo Legafola. He's outside the Bloemfontein's Magistrates Court, where the case has just been postponed until next week. That's what he's reporting. Of course, it's an interesting case, and a case that has been, made global headlines, really, about a man or his wife. Alleged details still to come out in the court case that will follow. We'll try and keep you informed on this channel how that story developed. For today, of course, the case is now postponed in the Magistrates Court in Bloemfontein. This weekend, South Africa joined global nations in welcoming the UN's adoption of the new Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. The new framework sets out 17 goals to end poverty, fight inequality and tackle climate change. Now, although the aspirations of the development goals are commendable, Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, is concerned that they lack a concrete plan to accelerate progress and address existing gaps in especially healthcare. To tell us a little bit more about these concerns, we are joined from Cape Town by the Director of South Africa's Médecins Sans Frontières Medical Unit, Dr. Tom Ellman. Very good morning to you, Dr. Ellman. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, thanks.
In the last 15 years, there have been historic achievements in reducing child mortality, improving maternal health, and tackling HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, other diseases. But MSF says the progress that has been made in the last 15 years is at risk. Why?
Well, absolutely right. There have been incredible improvements in the treatment and prevention of these diseases over the last 15 years, largely due to the focus that was given to health. We had the Millennium Development Goals, which are coming to the end at the end of this year, none of which have been achieved in those lowest income, the poorest countries in Africa, although there have been major changes. And our concern is that in moving away from health, the funding and the focus is going to disappear. So right now, we are on track to turning around the HIV/AIDS epidemic. There have been huge improvements in malaria prevention and treatment. But unless the focus is maintained, those things can very easily be rolled back. And in many countries, for example, Democratic Republic of Congo, less than 1 in 5 people who need access to HIV treatment have it. And we still see a situation similar to South Africa 15 years ago, where people are dying because they can't access either the diagnosis or the information to protect themselves or the treatment.
And what is your reaction to the points of discussion this weekend passed at the United Nations?
Well, I think it's an incredible achievement to have got consensus across the whole of the United Nations around these incredibly ambitious, aspirational targets to improve the world, to bring peace and security, to bring development, to bring equality. But what we see on the ground in the countries where Médecins Sans Frontières is working is very far from that dream. So to have a dream is fine, but we need real push behind it. We need action plans, we need clear, measurable targets, and we need money. At the moment, we have 1 out of 17 targets focused on healthcare in the new Sustainable Development Goals, compared to 3 out of 8 in the Millennium Goals. Now, that's not a problem in itself, but if we're trying to get all of these different targets competing for the same small package of funding and the same low political commitment, we're not going to achieve any of them. So we have to make sure that alongside this aspiration comes a real commitment and real accountability to meet those targets.
Let's bring it back to sub-Saharan Africa and South Africa, where HIV/AIDS is still the biggest killer of adolescents. Will countries with the highest number of AIDS infections receive the support they need going forward?
Well, there's a real danger there as well. One of the things that we've been highlighting is that much of the discussion around international development aid is focusing around the least developed countries, the poorest countries, which is absolutely right. But it tends to forget that many countries, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, India, have become so-called middle-income countries, meaning that they have less access to money for health and less access to international aid, but forgets the fact that still over 70% of the world's poorest people live in these so-called middle-income countries. And inequality within those countries also needs to be addressed alongside bringing up the level and providing focus on least developed countries. Also, countries affected by conflict and instability. West and Central Africa, less than a third of people in need of HIV treatment have access to it. So much of the world's focus has been on those countries that are able to at least manage some kind of stable response. But those countries where perhaps it's most needed are ignored from funding, and their voices aren't heard, and governments are not being held accountable to provide for the needs of people in those countries.
Vision 2030 talks about a commitment to end the AIDS epidemic, tuberculosis, malaria, and some other communicable diseases by 2030. Your view, is this realistic?
It's definitely realistic if the funding and the accountability is there. Our concern is that over the last 5-6 years, we've seen flatlining in global funding for health, and we've seen decreased commitment to fund communities being so essential to hold their governments accountable. If now we're going to see an even greater battle for a health priority amongst all of the other priorities and a failure to recognize the centrality of health to the development agenda, then we're not going to achieve those targets. So these aspirations that are encapsulated in the Sustainable Development Goals are good and essential, and we support them. But they have to be accompanied by accountability and by funding and by a community and civil society that will hold governments to account on realizing those goals.
Dr. Tom Allman, I thank you for joining us this morning. That's Dr. Tom Allman. He's Director of South Africa's MSF, Medicine Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, their medical unit. He came to us live from Cape Town now. Catching all the headlines this morning, Springbok captain Jean de Villiers announced his retirement from international rugby following a jaw fracture he sustained in a Rugby World Cup Pool B match against Samoa on Saturday. Sports Minister Vigile Mbalula has expressed his gratitude to de Villiers for his leadership, saying he put his body on the line for his country and he had been the glue that kept the team together. Views have been varied on social media. Lots of well wishes coming in for the Springbok captain. Let's have a look at some of those wishes. Manalisi Turner says, well done to Jean de Villiers. Great career. Love his interception tries back in the day, says Manalisi. Theo says, we thank you, Jean de Villiers, our captain, for always putting our country and team first before your own body. We salute you. Sash says, the young guns, though, I admire your wanting to fight for the Bokke again. Get well, Jean de Villiers. And there you have, of course, some of the memes that are coming through. Batman Day just some of the pictures that we see doing the rounds on social media. That's the captain as Batman. I think he might get a starring role in one of the sequels. Now let's take a look at our picture of the day. Of course, this one comes from Bobak Verdowsi. Caption, 1010 would watch again in 2033. talking about the super blood moon, and of course it peaked at between 3 and 5 a.m. this morning all over the world. The blood moon, beautiful, beautiful it was. There you see the picture. It was somewhat overcast here in Johannesburg, and we could only see it intermittently during that time. Let's now take a look at the front pages of newspapers from around the globe. We start in Europe. The Times reports that a plot to target Labour MPs who refused to serve under Jeremy Corbyn has been revealed in a leaked email from a senior officer in Britain's biggest union. Moving to Nigeria, the Vanguard says the number of Nigerian pilgrims that lost their lives in the stampede at Mina in Saudi Arabia last Thursday has risen to 20 from the initial 6. Then finally in China, the South China Morning Post reports that 5 people reportedly sustained injuries when the fire broke out at the Shake-1 typhoon shelter, sending thick black smoke billowing into the air. Take a quick look at what's happening around the country today. We start in Port Elizabeth, where Christopher Panayiotou and his co-accused will be back in the magistrate's court once again. Panayiotou, of course, accused of orchestrating his wife Jade's murder. The bail appeal was dismissed in the High Court in Grahamstown last month. Then in Johannesburg, judgment is expected to be handed down in the LaRusha Governor murder trial. That's at the Randburg Magistrates Court. Anthony Strauss admitted strangling Governor in a fit of rage after the pair had a disagreement. Then in Durban, 2 suspects are expected to appear before the Magistrates Court on charges of murder. The suspects allegedly stabbed the deceased to death, also following an argument between them. Time now for us to take a quick break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
As Africans, we tell a common story. Together, we make up a common picture. For the 7th time since 1998, AfriCities Summit is uniting people from local governments across the continent and asking them to contribute in voice and action to shape a common vision of transformed African cities by 2063. Join us. Learn about the AfriCities 7 Summit, Johannesburg, South Africa, 29 November to 3 December 2015.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. According to the South African Council of Educators, most complaints received against educators had to do with corporal punishment. In the second category of complaints, well, that was dealt with sexual offences against learners, amongst other things, unprofessional conduct, which included mismanagement, fraud, or violence even against other teachers. Now, in the 2014-15 financial year, the number of complaints against teachers doubled. SACE received over 500 teacher complaints compared to 283 the previous year. While complaints against teachers is not the only problem schools are facing, also safety within the school compound is an issue. Statistics which were released by SACE's chairwoman, Veronica Hofmeester, in August, South African schools came second after Jamaica with the most incidents of violence at schools. Hofmeester, who is also the vice president of SATU, said according to reports, 22% of pupils in South Africa had been threatened with violence, assaulted, robbed, or sexually assaulted at school. Now, to talk to us on this morning, we're joined by Troy Martins, the spokesperson for the Basic Education Department. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Eben. Thanks so much for inviting me onto the show.
The numbers are certainly quite alarming if you have a look at it. But let's start at the beginning. I want to talk about complaints against educators. Why do you believe there's this sudden spike in the level of call it, acts being perpetrated by teachers?
Well, Eben, I think it's something that is obviously extremely concerning for the department. It actually came up as a topic at our recent Council of Education Ministers meeting, where it was decided that we actually need an indaba of sorts to really look at the issues that lead to violence in schools and why we experience this type of violence in schools. I'm sure you saw recently as well, COSAS, the Congress of South African Students, also made a statement regarding corporal punishment, and they urged learners to fight back against instances of corporal punishment. And when we're at a stage like that, where there's calls for learners to fight back, it means our schools are really places that we need to look at them, because something definitely is wrong. We had a meeting with the Minister and COSAS leadership just last week, and they have retracted their call to fight back. But what was really fantastic was they put on the table an idea for a discipline summit of sorts that learners and teachers can participate in. And we think that that's a very progressive way to deal with it, to look at what the challenges are, what alternative means of discipline can be used so that teachers don't have to resort to this corporal punishment, which is outlawed. It's against the law, and you will be prosecuted if you're a teacher and you're caught administering corporal punishment.
What about the other elephant in the room, mismanagement of resources and the like? Are you afraid that we haven't touched the surface on there, that it might be worse than we think it is?
You know, school management is something that features very highly, and I think leadership plays a very big role in that. If you look at schools that are run well, you have fewer incidents of these types of violent behavior. What we're doing in the department is we are overseeing the implementation of the National School Strategy Framework for Safer Schools, which is basically an expansion on a care and support for teaching and learning program. Now, this we partner with the department, with the Center for Justice and Crime Prevention, as well as the United Nations International Children's Fund. And what that looks at is leadership in particular. It looks at the instilling the promotion of its essential rights and goals, and it has been piloted in some of our schools to a very large extent. Life orientation education also plays a very big role in inculcating values and morals through the curriculum. And we've also embarked on a huge teacher training exercise around the life orientation curriculum in particular, because it really is a valuable resource. But what we must also remember is that schools are microcosms of society. And if, for example, there is drugs and gang violence in society, that is going to filter into our schools. Now, in that respect, we have signed a protocol with the Department of Police, and we have embarked on a program to link schools to police stations. So when there is ever an incident of violence or any illegal activity in schools, that police station is on call, ready to respond and assist the school. We don't want a situation where we have policemen at schools. I don't think it's gotten to a situation, and research shows that actually makes it worse. But I think that we are putting measures in place. We're looking at how effective this protocol has been in the past. CEM called for that to be part of the next meeting, to look at that particular protocol that was signed and to say, has it been effective? Are we making inroads in that? So there's a number of things that we're doing, but we also need to remember that when it comes to essential morals and values, that really starts in the home, and parents and family members and communities really also need to play their part in raising holistic citizens.
It's the same with results. It's what happens in the home really is being reflected in the schools. But in South Africa, we have the unique situation where schools can at times be very violent. There's a lot of gang elements, and I wanted to ask you about problem areas, problem schools. We have certain pockets where there are problematic neighborhoods where schools are, where teachers are at risk, scholars are at risk. You're talking about not bringing the police onto the school, but what about slightly beefing up the security? Because often when the police comes, it's too late.
You know, I think that's something that at individual school levels, they need to speak to the parents, have governing body meetings, and decide on how they best want to deal with the security or the challenges of that school. I think we can't have a situation where we just enforce security on schools. I think there is policy in place to say, school governing bodies, this is your school. And it also means that the community needs to take ownership of that school. We need to rally communities to support schools. We can't have a situation where schools become fortresses or like prisons. There can't be. Schools need to be a community asset. We need, people must use schools to host fundraisers, to fundraise for the school garden, or really get the community involved in activities of the school, get the community to own that school, and get the community to protect that school. And then we won't have a situation where we need to bring heavy... it's such a horrible environment to have when you can much rather have an environment when we know this is a protected part of our community. We want teaching and learning to happen here in a peaceful manner, hands off our school and hands off our school kids.
Our schools should no longer be battlegrounds, and they are battlegrounds. The levels of violence are quite worrying. Thank you for joining us
today.
So much. Troy Martins is the spokesperson for the Basic Education Department here in South Africa. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
Now, a spectacular astronomic event seen only once every 2 or 3 decades lit up the night sky over South Africa early this morning. A blood-red supermoon and lunar eclipse were jointly visible for about between an hour and between 3 and 4 o'clock this morning. The full moon was visible at its nearest point to Earth with a shadow cast over it. Astronomers say the next such phenomenon will occur in 2033. Now, lots of pictures have been posted on social media and lots of comments have been coming through with regards to this super blood moon. Damn, what a day, but a good day. I don't know how I feel. So active after a 5-hour drive home with only 5 hours of sleep in 2 days, says Alex. Claire says, the super blood moon was cool. The insomnia that resulted in me being awake at that time of day to actually see it was not cool. Then Demozal says, I missed the super blood moon in Nigeria. Will there be another one, please? Yes, it'll be another one in 2033. Joy Irvin says, super blood moon worth the night hike to the top of the ridge. Very fortunate, Joy. There you have a picture, and I can tell you the pictures never do it justice. It looks so much bigger and so much more beautiful in real time with your own eyes outside. There you see some lovely pictures that have been doing the rounds on social media. Now for our tweet of the day. This one comes from our very own sports minister, Bigile Mbalula, saying, with Jean de Villiers, South Africa had one of the world's best captains, a patriot and a true warrior. We salute. Yes, Mr. Minister, we all salute Jean de Villiers today. A wonderful man and one of South Africa's greatest sporting ambassadors in recent times. Just a wonderful, warm human being. Now let's take a look at what is happening on Newsroom's Facebook page. When National Police Commissioner General Ria Piecha releases the crime stats tomorrow, the numbers will probably reflect an increase in violent crime. Then the new president of the African Development Bank has called for all stakeholders in the energy sector to fast-track universal access to energy in Africa by 2025. And the joint UN program on HIV and AIDS believes the world has reached a tipping point where smart investments over the next 5 years will determine the ultimate trajectory of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Now, the man who's been called the South African of the Year, Trevor Noah, will have his first appearance as the new host of America's top talk show, The Daily Show, tonight. Let's have a look.
Welcome to The Daily Show. Welcome to The Daily Show. With me, Trevor Noah. I am The Daily Show! Daily Show! New and sexy. Ha! Oh, wow. Oh, that's...
Well, time for us to take a short break. We're all looking forward to seeing Trevor Noah after a short break.
we tell a common story. Together, we make up a common picture. For the 7th time since 1998, AfriCity Summit is uniting people from local governments across the continent and asking them to contribute in voice and action to shape a common vision of transformed African cities by 2063. Join us. Learn about the AfriCities 7th Summit, Johannesburg, South Africa, 29 November to 3 December 2015.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines. Minister of Sport Fikile Mbalula and Springbok coach Heineke Meyer have paid tribute to John de Villiers. The Springbok captain announced his retirement from international rugby last night. This following the jaw fracture he sustained in Saturday's Rugby World Cup match. It's D-Day for National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha. The National Police Commissioner has to make representations against her suspension to President Jacob Zuma today. Piecha has been asked to explain why she should not be suspended, pending the final determination of her fitness to hold office. And it's not yet clear if Czech fugitive Radovan Krejcir will be charged for his alleged involvement in a foiled prison break. This after Krejcir was allegedly among the inmates who were planning to escape from the Zonderwater Correctional Centre north of Pretoria. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for SABC Newsroom. Of course, you can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Janina. International legal history was made last week with the first sale in execution of a Zimbabwean property here in South Africa. The auction of the Cape Town property was the direct result of President Robert Mugabe's alleged human rights abuses in his country. AfriForum is assisting a group of dispossessed Zimbabwean commercial farmers to enforce a 2008 ruling by the South African Development Community's Regional Court. The SADC tribunal ruled that President Robert Mugabe's 2000 land grabs were unlawful, racist, and in contravention of applicable international law. At least 4,000 white commercial farmers were evicted from their farms. The auction followed a 5-year battle to force the Harare administration to pay legal costs after losing a court challenge against their controversial land reforms. The property near the Kenilworth Racecourse was auctioned for around 3.7 million rand. The legal representative of AfriForum and for the dispossessed Zimbabwean farmers, Willie Spess, is here with us in the studio. Very good morning to you.
Morning, Evan.
A landmark case. Tell us, why is this case important?
I think the case was important back in 2008 because it laid down certain principles that were important not only to Zimbabwe but also to South Africa. We also sit with a situation where land reform is imminent, where it is happening. And it's always critical that an independent forum should look at the way we are doing things and the way things should not be done. And in 2008, the SADC court, which was presided by 5 African judges, unanimously ruled that the way Zimbabwe did it was not right and it had to stop. Unfortunately, the Zimbabwean government ignored the ruling, and we had to take further steps in order to enforce whatever we can enforce in that regard. And that's why we went further. We went to the South African High Court, to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and eventually the Constitutional Court as well. And we succeeded, and that led to the sale of the property last week.
How are the affected farmers going to be compensated, and how many are there? There are quite a lot of them, so yes. The 3.7 million rand is not going to go that far.
No, not at all. I think this, what happened last week is, and we should remember, the only money part of the order that was enforced was the order for costs. Unfortunately, the SADC tribunal was not allowed to make a ruling on the quantum, the actual amount that farmers are entitled to. The tribunal was suspended by political leaders after what happened. So the quantum is not yet determined. So what happened here was only the cost The legal cost element was dealt with. But the important thing of it is that, to a very large extent, we managed to convey a symbolical message. And the symbolism of this sale is of very much importance to every single farmer who lost. Because if you sit in the situation where 4,000 former farmers in Zimbabwe are sitting, then you need hope. You need to be reassured that you're on the right side of the law, because they are actually being persecuted in Zimbabwe at the moment. You need to be reassured that you're on the right side of the law. And these kind of actions just send that symbolical messages that people really need.
Land reforms have to happen in South Africa. It's a fact.
Yes.
What is the lesson that we should learn from what happens in Zimbabwe, but also within the legal framework?
Yes. To a very large extent, one critical, it was a fatal mistake in the Zimbabwean land reform policies, is that they introduced a measure of take now, pay later. They took the property without paying, and certain undertakings were given. Well, for 15 years already, certain undertakings have been given to pay or to compensate the farmers, at least for the improvements. Nothing materialized. It did not happen. So people lost everything without being compensated. In South Africa, at this very moment, Parliament is considering a new expropriation law that also provides for this construction of take now and pay later. We think it's bad, we think it's wrong, and it needs to be stopped, and we need to learn from the mistakes of Zimbabwe. Because what happens when a government take now and pay later is government destroys the economy. And once the economy is destroyed, it becomes impossible for government to pay later, and it becomes impossible for government to function later. So it's a suicide mission. We should avoid it in South Africa at all costs.
What's the balance? Where's the tipping point? Where do you think the balance should be reached?
Well, one important critical fact is that property rights, the right to own property, is a basic human right. And the right not to be deprived of your property rights in a fashion that we saw in Zimbabwe is also a right that needs to be protected at all costs. Once we compromise on that right, then you would see that all other rights also come into question, and eventually it leads to a total disintegration of the rule of law and of basic human rights. So let's protect the right to property. Where we need to take or expropriate property, let's compensate people in a proper fashion, in a way that is determined by an impartial forum, such as a court. And then when the principles are being done in the right way, things will go forward and we will make progress.
Billy Spisa, thank you for joining us. Representatives for AfriForum and for the dispossessed Zimbabwean farmers, of course, a landmark case in the courts last week, a ruling in favour of the farmers. They got 3.76 million rand damages when a property was auctioned off close to the Kenilworth racecourse in the Western Cape, in Cape Town, that is. Thank you for joining us this morning. Now, the Springboks believe they can still win the Rugby World Cup despite the humiliation inflicted by the defeat at the hands of Japan. That's according to star flanker Francois Lowe. He said the Springboks are now back on track at the World Cup after thrashing Samoa in their must-win Pool B clash over the weekend. The Springboks ran in 6 tries for a bonus point win and gave the perfect response after a torrid week of soul-searching and reflection after their shock loss. South Africa proved over the weekend that they are, well, now one of the favourites going into the back end of the tournament, and they shouldn't be underestimated. But there's still a long way to go before the green and gold lads can even think of lofting the William Webb-Ellis Trophy. The focus is now Saturday against Scotland. It'll be another tough encounter. For an update, Simon Burke is with the team. They've now moved further north to Newcastle. That's in the northern parts of England. Very good morning to you, Simon. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Evan. How are you doing?
Very good this Monday. Much better than last week Monday. I can tell you that, Simon. Last week felt a little bit like a hangover after that horrific loss. But tell us about the mood, especially within the context of, Captain Jean de Villiers being sent home for a 4th World Cup in a row.
Well, this World Cup just has its ups and its downs. And it seems like the Springboks, when they just get a little bit of an up, it hit straight rock bottom again. And it's very somber here in the Springbok camp here in Newcastle. They took a train ride up from Birmingham. By then, most of the squad the squad knew that Jean was out of the World Cup. His jaw, again, the other side of his jaw fractured. He needs to go home and seek urgent medical attention for that. There's just no way he can take to the field. And so he held a press conference yesterday, and he was really reflective and very, very sad about what's going on. About having to leave the camp, about having to play what he said his last game for South Africa. And then it was a case of, we have to reflect on this, one of the greats of Springbok rugby, but at the same time, there's still a World Cup, and they're up in Newcastle to play Scotland, and that was the fixture that everyone earmarked, apart from Samoa as being the key fixture in Pool B. The Springboks seem to have gotten their act together, and they need to now, draw closer together, even in spite of all the sad news that's come out. Because Scotland, they're a pretty handy side at the moment, and they've been watching closely the Springbok matches. Both times their support and technical staff have been at the stadium, just taking notes, quietly observing everything. And I think they've got the best chance in a long time of beating the Springboks.
Simon, quickly, it's Monday, and on a Monday, you always count the cost of the weekend's victory. Injury update, I saw Damien Delendi sitting with a strapped-up knee. He had ice on his knee. Jesse Kriel left the field. He looked like he picked up an injury, which means South Africa has a real issue in the midfield if these two players are also deemed doubtful.
Yeah, Dr. Craig Roberts gave us an update on the status of those players, Damien Delendi with his knee and Jesse Kriel with facial injuries. However, he wouldn't go so far as to clear them, but he did say that he is quietly confident and hopeful that both of them should be ready for the weekend, as should Yanni du Plessis, who also sustained a bit of a knee injury. The one concern is Willem Albert. He's got until today to prove his fitness. If he's not fit enough, then he has to be sent home, unfortunately, because he's not going to get right in time. So, yes, there are worries at centre. There's also worries in the back row. But the doctor, without giving too much away, he seems confident about the two key guys, Jesse Kriel and Damien Delendi. So we hold thumbs for them, and we're going to monitor them closely throughout the week.
Simon Burke, thank you very much for that update. Simon Burke is in Newcastle this week, where the Boks are preparing to take on Scotland, and it will be a tough game. The Scots have a very good side. Let's just take a quick look at and show you what the pools are looking like after the weekend's matches. Pool A, of course, a very tight one now after England were upset by Wales on Saturday night. Australia and Wales are unbeaten there, and they top on 9 points apiece. England have 6 points, of course, picking up 2 bonus points. It could still keep them in the fray, but they would have to beat Australia over the weekend. Pool B, there you see South Africa. Well, if they want to top the group, they'll have to beat Scotland, and they really have to beat Scotland, because if South Africa loses, they will be overtaken by either Samoa or Japan, depending on who wins that match coming up same time over the weekend. So South Africa, do or die this weekend. Pool C, New Zealand, well, they're going to walk that one by the looks of it after beating Argentina. Argentina now favourites to finish in second place. Georgia, Tonga, Namibia, bringing up the rear there, really. Pool D, Ireland on top, unbeaten with 2 bonus point wins. France in second place. Looks pretty clear-cut who is going to be the 2 teams coming out of that group. South Africans around the country, well, some are still celebrating following the 46-6 demolition of Samoa at the weekend. The win injected the much-needed boost for the Boks team, who now say they're confident they can win the Rugby World Cup. Of course, many doubters and supporters on all the social media platforms. NJ says, let's take the opportunity to thank Commander Jean de Villiers for serving his nation with commitment and pride. Springboks, we believe, says NJ. Nay Malik says, why is Jean de Villiers abandoning his ship? The team needs him to lead them, even if it's from the sidelines. Well, I think he's got to come back and have his jaw wired up by the looks of it. Neil Collins, British pound worth over 21 rands this morning, but England devalued heavily next to RSA in the Rugby World Cup. Yes, they were beaten 28-25 by Wales in a classic match on Saturday night. Well, that's some of the views. It's a good Bok Monday. It's always nice when the Springboks win. That's where we wrap it. Newsroom, of course, broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. We also stream live on YouTube at that time, where the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.
Catch! Point! Set!
Get behind Rugby World Cup 2015 on SABC.
Morning Live sets the agenda for the day.
We bring you the latest local and international news.
We are on the ball with all your sports activities and results.
We give you the latest business update.
We bring you the latest weather every time.
Watch Morning Live every weekday morning at 6 o'clock, bringing you everything you need to know before you go. Shap shap, tada.
SABC brings to you Rugby World Cup 2015.
Let's do this.
My name is Emmanuel Nkole. I come from the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was then Zaire. I came in South Africa in 1999, and since I'm in South Africa, I only worked employed for a few months, and most of the time I worked myself and created an opportunity for myself until I became at a certain stage and then started employing people. A friend or a brother that is now my business partner is a South African, Vincent Piki. He had an idea of giving back to the community. He had a target group, a group of people, young people that he wanted to really create an impact in their lives. Mostly those who come from the disadvantaged communities. That was our first intake. Then the second came, we trained 100 of them, and then that's how we really got to where we are now. We were then only training, but now we have a production unit where we even employed some of our own guys that we trained. We tell them that now you have the skill. Going, looking for a job, you might not find an opportunity, but you can start yourself, because I started myself, and some have succeeded. We have a case of Oliver Kokong in Mushakek, that side of Rasenbeek. He's running his own shop. We have Thomas in Val, we have Sivuile in Orange Farm, we have guys in Pretoria, Tidimalo, the Dupes, and some have been even employed by some of the departments to do things that are in relation with the clothing industry or the garment production.
I firstly came here to FUMU with no idea about fashion skills. I didn't have any fashion skills. They started me from scratch, from designing, pattern making, sketching, that stuff. So I didn't have any skills when I came to FUMU. But now I'm a great designer. As you can see, the clothes, like most of them, they were designed by me.
I'm a quality controller here. I started as a student. Now I work here as a quality controller. A quality controller checks the quality. Like, say for instance, we must sew a jacket. When it's done, comes to me to check the quality and stuff. If it's well done, it can go to the shops, and if it's not well done, goes back to the production room.
The quality of work, the quality of the cutting, the sewing of